Hello, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. Thank you for joining us on our first 30-minute weathercast show, I guess you would call it. We're going to call it, what are we going to call this, Jeb? We don't even know yet. We're just going to call it Weather Impact for 30 minutes, That's pretty much what we're going to talk about. But we're going to get into some of the weather today. One of the first things we're going to talk about is local weather. We'll focus on some national weather as well. Occasionally, we're going to bring in some guests when we have topics that, pique our interest about weather, science, climate, nature, astronomy, all the geeky stuff that I love. We're going to get into that as well. But we do have some storms tonight. So that's the first thing I want to talk about because we've had a pretty quiet day. It was a weird weekend. We had really hazy, hot, humid weather. If you were out and about this weekend, you noticed it was the first really sticky weekend of the year. In fact, we had our first 90-degree day. This evening, we're watching storms coming in from the southwest. Now, typically, by the time you would see me at 6:30, we'd already be tracking storms into our area, but they haven't really gotten here yet, which is kind of a unique setup. So we'll focus on a couple of the storms we do have out there right now. If you're watching over in Cleveland County, western York County, southern Gaston County, that's an area where we already have some storms not too far away. In fact, this storm lurking just to the south of Spartanburg, this is heading up 85. So if you've got evening practice with the kids, maybe you're at the pool, you're probably going to start hearing some rumbling here in a few minutes. You're going to want to head to a safe spot for sure until this storm passes. Remember, even if the storm isn't severe, lightning is always a huge danger in these storms. And we have this saying, and it really does make a lot of sense. When thunder roars, you go indoors. That's because if you hear thunder, you could get hit by lightning. And remember, lightning and thunder, I think a lot of times we think they're separate. Lightning is the visual part. Thunder is the sound that lightning makes. So you can't have one without the other. So that storm in particular right there is moving northeast. It looks like around 30 miles per hour. So I'm going to do a quick storm track on that just to give you an idea on when it's going to arrive, because this is really the first time today that I've had anything on the radar that was even remotely close to impacting us here in our area. So again, if you see Boiling Springs, around 6:36, which is coming up shortly, Shelby, so heads up in Shelby, folks over there, that's coming closer to about 6:52 or so. And then, Gastonia, Dallas, Cramerton, Belmont, if it holds together, that's going to be closer to about 7 to 7:25, 7:30-ish or so. And that's really the concern for that is going to be lightning primarily. But if we do see it become severe, wind is our number one concern. This is not a tornado setup today. We don't have the spin in the atmosphere that we would worry about with any kind of rotation. But if we widen this out, you'll see this pretty big area of thunderstorms developing to the southwest. This is kind of a cool feature that formed yesterday in Texas, believe it or not, caused a lot of damage there. And what happens is sometimes when we have big storms like we had in the middle of the country, they create this thing called an MCV. We love acronyms in weather. MCV, what the heck is that? It stands for Mesoscale Convective Vortex. It's basically a low pressure system that was formed by thunderstorms. So these MCVs will move east, and they basically act just like a regular low pressure system. And this one is heading through Georgia right now, and it's probably going to help trigger some evening and overnight showers and storms. They could be strong, they could be severe, but right now that seems to be trending down for the main reason that we don't have any fuel for these storms. We show this graphic quite a bit. We call it CAPE. CAPE is another acronym. I told you we love acronyms in meteorology. What is CAPE? It stands for Convectively Available Potential Energy. Basically just storm fuel. So think of this as the gasoline for an engine. Well, we got the engine coming in. It's that MCV, and then you throw this CAPE, you get some storms. But right now, you can see the gray is actually our base map color, so that means there's no CAPE where you see gray on the map. And where you see the darker shades of red, that's very low fuel. So there's not a lot of storm fuel out there, which is amazing considering temperatures jumped into the mid and upper 80s today. We just didn't have a ton of humidity like we had this past weekend when dew points were pushing something like 70 degrees. Most of our dew points out there right now are generally in the 50s. So let me show you the impacts I expect this evening. If we're going to see significant impacts, it's going to be wind. Wind is our number one concern. And wind is always our biggest concern in any storms. I think oftentimes tornadoes get a lot of billing, rightfully so. They're dangerous, strongest winds on the face of the earth. But in our area, just from experience and from statistics, 90% of our severe weather damage comes from straight line winds. That means for every thunderstorm, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be straight line winds. And straight line winds could be anywhere as high as 58 miles per hour, but go up all the way to 150 miles per hour. In fact, yesterday we saw some of these storms in North Texas and West Texas that produced 100-mile per hour winds, causing extensive tree damage, power line damage, structural damage. Pretty much looked like a tornado, but it was straight line wind damage. And I want to show you some of the damage reports we had in the middle of the country, because that's the same little complex. It's not the same storm, by the way. It's the same piece of energy, if you will, that helped produce the severe weather in Texas. We'll go to Texas and you could see, I'll zoom in on North Texas. Look at all those. Those are within the last 24 hours. So think of all the storm reports we saw in the past 24 hours across Texas. And I'm going to quickly show you how many we've seen. So I'll kind of put a big cursor over this. So this is West Texas, Northern Texas, as well as the Red River Valley. 203 reports of severe weather. And it looks like thunderstorm wind damage was the majority of that. We had 1 funnel cloud, 11 flood reports, but even some non-thunderstorm winds, which are winds that aren't associated with a thunderstorm but strong enough to cause some damage. So this was pretty extensive stuff that we saw in North Texas last night, and that's the same system that we're kind of tracking tonight. So let's look at the future casts. Let's see if this is going to unfold like we think it will tonight in our area, because I do think we are going to see these storms kind of maintain themselves. You could see right now not a lot going on, but as I go into the evening hours, we'll get closer to 8 o'clock. This show is going to go to 7, but at 8 o'clock we're still pretty quiet. Where things get a little more interesting is closer to our late news tonight, so maybe closer to 11 p.m. That's when we could see some strong storms develop, mainly to the south. You see those storms moving in from areas from Rock Hill, maybe to Wadesboro to Sherraw. But honestly, it looks like the majority of this might stay to our south. So when I move down there, you see those storms basically from the upstate of South Carolina all the way through, the Midlands of South Carolina. So this is that area I'm going to highlight right there. We'll kind of circle it. That's the area of greatest concern right now into the overnight hours. And this is an area that over the weekend, remember, was hit really hard. For folks watching on the stream down in the Midlands of South Carolina, Columbia got hit really hard over the weekend. We had a couple waves of pretty strong storms move through there, and something on the order of, several thousands of people without power in those areas. So it was really, really strong there. So we want to tell you, if you're watching us on, any other platform, YouTube, Facebook, wherever, if you want to watch us continuously, what you got to do is go grab the WCNC Plus app, especially for your smart TV, Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. Grab that app and you can watch us 24/7. When we're in the midst of severe weather, this is a really good resource for you to have, because you can actually watch us streaming the storms before they get severe. And we do that quite a bit here at WCNC and on WCNC Plus. It's often why you'll see us on top of these storms before anybody else, because usually we're going to be streaming them as they move into our area. And now Brittany Van Voorhees was doing some great work this weekend streaming that. And so, when you have storms threatening and you're going, hey, I can't look at my weather app, nobody's on TV right now, this is where you can go get us. Go to WCNC Plus and you can get an update on the weather immediately, especially if there's active weather in the area. And it was an active weekend. Let's be honest. We had a lot of storms around us. It wasn't so much over us, but to the south and to the east, we had a ton of storms. And that's kind of what we're watching tonight with this second round of storms trying to move in tonight. So again, the storms, if you're worried about this evening and you're going to bed, this is the time frame, 11 o'clock, maybe even closer to midnight or so. Look at that little cluster coming up from the south. So around midnight, pretty heavy batch of rain coming in.